Modern science still studies consciousness like it is a machine. But Ibn Arabi said, consciousness is not in the universe? Consciousness is the reason the universe even exists. Stay silent 1 second. Then drop the title line, that scientists still don't know. Ibn Arabi already said, science is still trapped inside matter. Science still believes reality begins with physical particles. Science still thinks consciousness is produced by the brain like smoke is produced by fire. But Ibn Arabi flipped that entire model 800 years ago. He said matter is not the starting point. Matter is a result. Existence is not physical first. Existence is pure being first, and physical reality is only a thin shadow of that being. This is the part science still hasn't crossed. Scientists argue, mind is created by brain chemistry. Self is a neurological effect, awareness the survival strategy of evolution. But Ibn Arabi said, mind does not come from brain. Brain comes from being, and being is conscious before it is. Physical being is primary, matter is secondary. Reality is not a dead event. Reality is a living intention. Said the universe is not an object. The universe is a messenger. The universe is not a thing outside you. The universe is an interface between the real and your perception. Physical things are symbols, forms are signs, atoms are metaphors, and the real is the one reading and writing through them. Science is still measuring the symbols, but Ibn Arabi spoke about the authoritative study what is visible. But Ibn Arabi said the visible is only the veil of the invisible. Science keeps trying to find reality by looking deeper into matter. But Ibn Arabi said, you will never find reality by magnifying dust, because what is real is not the particle. What is real is the meaning that gives the particle existence. I said the world out there is not a place, it is a mirror, and what you call myself is also a mirror, and the one looking through both mirrors is the omniscience is still trying to prove consciousness. Ibn Arabi said consciousness is not something you prove. Consciousness is the proof itself. Science waits for evidence. Ibn Arabi said, the evidence is the one who is waiting. Science is late. Mystics are early. Science is learning, but love is remembering. And Ibn Arabi stood in the place where remembering began. Modern science still believes consciousness is a product of the brain, but Ibn Arabi said the brain is only a reflection of consciousness, not its source. And this single reversal changes the entire map of reality, because modern science builds from matter upward. It says neurons fire, then awareness appears. It says chemicals move, then experience happens. It says biology writes the script and consciousness reads it. But Ibn Arabi says awareness writes the script and biology is just the paper. The difference is not small. This difference is the difference between thinking you are a machine that accidentally woke up and thinking you are a ray of the real that temporarily entered matter to witness itself from another angle. Science says the brain is the hardware and consciousness is the software, but Ibn Arabi says being as the hardware and brain is just a temporary screen that displays a fraction of the infinite informational field of the real. So when people say cognition is emergent, Ibn Arabi would say no, cognition is primordial and matter is emergent. Matter is not the builder of awareness. Matter is what awareness condenses into in order to be seen, because awareness is not the final stage of evolution. Awareness is the first stage of existence, and this is why the scientific worldview produces existential loneliness, because if consciousness is an accident, then your life is a glitch. But if consciousness is the source, then your life is a signature from the absolute, and you are not a mistake, you are a mirror. This changes everything, because science still cannot explain how dead matter wakes up. The hard problem of consciousness is literally the panic moment where scientists realize they do not even have a pathway to explain how neurons produce subjective experience. They can map behavior, but they cannot explain being itself. They can study the chemical correlates, but correlations not causes. Correlation is not identity. They can describe the electrical patterns, but description is not explanation. They can detect activity, but activity is not consciousness, because activity can be mechanical and unconscious. Consciousness is not just motion. Consciousness is revelation, and Ibn Arabi saw this centuries before modern science even existed. The modern world still thinks awareness is a late product of evolution, but the mystic sees awareness as the reason evolution exists. Modern science thinks consciousness is on the inside of the skull, But Ibn Arabi sees consciousness as the canvas on which the skull is projected in the first place. Consciousness is not a bubble trapped in a brain. Consciousness is the field in which brains float like ripples on a surface, and this is why the mystic is not surprised by synchronicity, not surprised by revelation, not surprised by intuition, not surprised by knowing without data, because the mystic is not trying to push knowledge into existence by force. The mystic is letting existing knowledge reveal itself. The mystic is tuning into the frequency of being. Science wants to measure the frequency of being through instruments, but the instrument is also inside being, so the measurement cannot escape metaphysics. Science keeps looking outward, but Ibn Arabi turned inward, because inward is not inside the body. Inward is inside being. Inward is where the real unfolds itself without veil, and this is why science is still arrogant while being confused, and mysticism is silent while being certain, because certainty does not come when facts accumulate. Certainty comes when false identity burns. The modern mind thinks consciousness is private and limited and personal, but Ibn Arabi sees consciousness as universal and impersonal and selective. The human is not producing consciousness. The human is receiving consciousness like a lens receives light, and the quality of lens determines how much of the real gets expressed, because consciousness is not trapped in the human body. The human body is trapped inside consciousness. The body is not the origin. The body is an avatar. The self is not the generator. The self is a temporary role, and this is why the mystic does not try to justify consciousness, because consciousness is the one justifying all things. The one who asks where consciousness comes from is asking from inside consciousness itself. The question is proof. The ability to ask is the evidence. The fact that you can wonder is the sign that you are more than matter, because matter cannot wonder, matter cannot mean, matter cannot intend, matter cannot see, matter can only behave, and consciousness can see the behavior, which means consciousness precedes the behavior, which means Ibn Arabi already solved the problem that modern science has only recently realized in wording, but not in understanding. Seen studies the universe as an external object, but Ibn Arabi said the universe is an internal mirror through which the real sees itself, and this one sentence reveals a shockingly different metaphysical architecture of reality, because modern science is still operating under the assumption that the universe is something out there and the observer is something in here, and the two are separated by space, distance, and subject-object duality. But Ibn Arabi collapses this model completely. He says the outer world is not outside you. The outer world is a projection of the inner real. The cosmos is not a machine. The cosmos is a metaphor. The stars, galaxies, particles, time, space, all these are symbols and signs and patterns of disclosure. Every form is a language. The universe is scripture, not stone, and the reader of that scripture is the same one who authored it. So, when you think you are looking at a universe, you are actually looking at a mirror of God, reading God through the lens of your particular consciousness. So the world is not objective in the sense of being independent. The world is a dependent event, dependent upon perception, dependent upon awareness, dependent upon the real unfolding itself into visibility. Science keeps trying to capture meaning through measurement, but meaning cannot be measured because measurement is already happening inside meaning. The measured object is not separate from the measurer. Consciousness and cosmos are not two separate categories. They are two aspects of one unfolding, and everything you call physical is actually metaphysical, being slowed down into perceptible form. Ibn Arabi says, the world is tajalli, manifestation shining forth, and manifestation is not the source. Manifestation is the revelation of a hidden source. Science analyzes the revealed forms but does not know the revealer. Science sees the words but not the author. Science keeps trying to decode the text but ignores the pen that wrote the text. Ibn Arabi says, the universe is the veil of the real, yet curtain and revealed are not two separate things, because the one who hides is the one who reveals, and both hiding and revealing happen inside consciousness, which means your experience of reality is not an observation, it is participation. You are not watching the universe from outside, you are co-appearing within the same field of being. The universe is not a container, the universe is a mirror. The cosmos is not a warehouse, the cosmos is a reflection. The world does not have meaning, the world is meaning being read from a specific point of view, and that point of view is also part of the same meaning, so the observer is not separate, the observer is a mode of the observed, which is why non-dual realization is not a poetic intuition, it is a metaphysical recognition, that the boundary between my consciousness and the universe is conceptual, not actual, the separation is imaginative, not ontological, so when scientists call the universe said, material, Ibn Arabi would say, you are only seeing the surface of the metaphor, you are measuring the mirror, but you are not recognizing what the mirror is mirroring, because the physical world is the visible face of the invisible, and the invisible is not somewhere else, the invisible is the depth dimension of the here, the universe is the real looking at itself through differentiation, every soul, the window, every perception is a revelation, every phenomenon is a disclosure, the cosmos is not a random explosion of blind matter, the cosmos is a deliberate unfolding of conscious being into patterned visibility, and every moment of existence. Another page of the same metaphysical book, Science Studies, the letters mysticism sees the author. And the author is not outside the book, the author is writing himself into every line of the book. Science has not understood this, because science stands at the surface and tries to measure reflections, but Ibn Arabi steps behind the reflection into the light itself, and sees that the universe is not a thing at all, it is the mirror through which the one reads and recognizes its own. Facetionists look for truth inside matter, but Ibn Arabi said matter is only a symbolic language, and the truth is the one who writes through matter, and this difference is so radical that most people don't even notice when they are standing inside the wrong paradigm, because modern people think the universe is literal, they think a rock is just a rock and an atom is just an atom, and a star is just gas burning in empty space. But Ibn Arabi says everything you see is metaphor, everything you call physical is actually a sentence. The real is speaking in the alphabet of form, matter is not substance. Matter is meaning, wearing costume, matter is not independent, matter is dependent, matter is not solid, matter is symbolic, and the only reason matter appears literal is because your perception is still immature, and is still reading the universe like a child reads a page without knowing grammar. The world is a text, and most humans are still reading the text like it is a physical object instead of a message, which is why modern science sometimes looks brilliant, but spiritually blind scientists can measure a particle yet not see the one who is speaking through that particle. They can split atoms, but they cannot split the illusion that matter is final. They can describe behavior, but they cannot explain being, because being is not a thing. Being is the one who gives things their existence. So, when a scientist studies matter without seeing meaning, he is studying ink, but not reading the sentence. He is analyzing the shape of letters, but not understanding the language that those letters belong to. He is touching shadows, while believing that shadows are the source. Ibn Arabi calls this confusion the worship of form, because when the heart is not awake, form becomes idol. When the heart is not awake, symbol becomes prison, and the world becomes a closed box instead of an illuminated poem. And this is why mystics do not obsess over the details of matter, because matter is not the point is the author behind matter. Matter is the stage set, not the story. Matter is the rapper, not the fruit. Matter is the map, not the territory. The map has meaning because it points to something beyond itself. The symbol has meaning because it points to something deeper, and the deeper is the real, which cannot be measured or reduced to a physical unit, because the real is not inside the world is inside the real. The world is not explaining God, God is explaining the world through the world. So what science calls physical laws, Ibn Arabi calls divine habits. What science calls natural patterns, Ibn Arabi calls modes of disclosure. What science calls phenomena, Ibn Arabi calls signs. The European Enlightenment made the world material and dead, but the mystic sees the world living and full of secret intention, because every atom is a verse, every photon is a metaphor, and every moment is a sentence in an infinite book, and the one reading this book and the one writing this book are the same reality in different modes of appearing. Ibn Arabi once implied that the universe is not a noun, it is a verb, and the verb is being itself, flowing from hidden to visible, from invisible to manifest, from meaning to form, from real to appearance, and everything in this movement is communication, not accident. The galaxies are communication, the neurons are communication, the soil is communication, the breath is communication. So the world is not a container of matter, it is a conversation between the one and the one through the illusion of the many. This is why scientists cannot solve the final mystery, because they are studying the symbols while ignoring the grammar. The grammar is being, the grammar is unity, the grammar is oneness, and until you see that all multiplicity is a reflection of one single source, your knowledge will always remain fragmented. The mystic sees the unity behind fragmentation, and that unity is not poetic language, it is literal metaphysics. There is only the real, and the world is the mirror of the real, and to confuse the mirror for the face is the tragedy of the modern mind, because science looks into the mirror searching for truth, while Ibn Arabi turns around to meet the one who is being reflected in the mirror in the first processions, tries to prove consciousness exists. But Ibn Arabi said consciousness is the proof, and the one asking for evidence is the evidence, and this is a reversal so enormous that the modern world still has not psychologically or philosophically caught up to it, because this flips the entire structure of evidence upside down. Every scientist in the lab is doing experiments to determine whether consciousness emerges out of neural complexity or physical arrangement. But Ibn Arabi stands at a position before science and says, no, you are making a category error. You are trying to prove the very thing that is enabling you to attempt proof. The witness is trying to prove the witness exists, as if the eye needs a microscope to prove its own ability to see, as if the mind needs a theory to validate that it is thinking, as if the soul needs a formula to confirm it has awareness. Ibn Arabi says consciousness is the axiomatic ground, it is the fundamental unprovable, because it is self-evidencing, the first fact, the first certainty, the first light, and science misses this, because science thinks consciousness is a late event at the end of evolution. But Ibn Arabi says consciousness is the primordial event that precedes the possibility of evolution itself, because evolution is a movement inside conscious being. The entire universe is appearing inside consciousness, not consciousness appearing inside universe, and the human being is not generating awareness. The human being is a localization of awareness, an aperture, a window, a focusing lens through which the real sees itself in a particular mode. And this is why mystics never stress about proving God, because God is not a hypothesis, God is the fact of being itself, and being is self-evident in consciousness. And consciousness, the arena in which the entire drama of evidence takes place, there is no evidence outside consciousness, because evidence is a phenomenon inside awareness. The scientific world asks for proof, but does not notice that the asking itself already implies consciousness. Without consciousness, you cannot ask. Without consciousness, you cannot doubt. Without consciousness, you cannot measure. Without consciousness, you cannot interpret. And if you cannot interpret data, then data has no meaning, and therefore no proof can exist. Without consciousness, consciousness is the condition for proof, not the object of proof. You cannot prove the light while using the light to run the experiment, because the light is the precondition, not the experiment. And this is why Ibn Arabi says your certainty is inside you, not outside you. Your certainty is not in microscopes, telescopes, particle accelerators. Your certainty is not in photons, electrons, measurements, probability curves. Your certainty is in the fact that you are aware that you are aware. Even if you doubted everything else, the doubter is still there. The witness is still there. The one who knows he is thinking is still there, even if he thinks wrong. The metaphysical foundation is not the correctness of thought, it is the existence of the thinker. Thought can be false, thinker cannot be false, because existence of awareness is the primitive irreducible fact, and science avoids this, because if science admits this, then science must admit that consciousness is not inside matter, matter is inside consciousness, and then the entire materialist structure collapses, because matter would become secondary, not primary. Mind would become foundational, not derivative. The cosmos would be the dream of being, the reflection of the real, the manifestation of a single unity, and the human being would not be a random biological accident. He would be a site of disclosure, a theater, where the real sees itself, and this is the metaphysical revolution that the future will eventually have to face, because you cannot forever pretend that the witness is optional. The witness is the ground, the witness is the only fact that cannot be eliminated, and that is why Ibn Arabi never tried to Prove consciousness, he simply pointed to the one who was trying to prove it and said the proof you seek is the one who is seeking, therefore the proof is already present and the search is only the drama through which the real awakens to the recognition that it was the proof all along.